Thank you, Nana and Charité, for allowing me to discuss one of my favorite topics with this dynamic panel. We had a pre-discussion yesterday, which was quite diverse, and I hope that we can continue that. So on the panel, we have a politician and policymaker, and we have 3 entrepreneurs, and we also have several countries represented. And so we have a great deal of diversity here. Let me give a short introduction. Özge is a professor of material science and both does research and teaches and is an entrepreneur. To her right is Heather, and Heather is the founder and CEO of Serona. She's based in the Bay Area like I am, and her startup, which she'll tell you about, is eliminating sex and gender-related blind spots. This is a key word in science, and in particular is looking at the hormonal variation in women as relates to several other diseases. Natalie, you have heard from, and Bola is our great male representative on the panel, to which we're very grateful to you. And as signified by the color scheme here, he is an elected official for the Green Party and is going to help us have the policy point of view and also tell us a little bit about some intriguing policies that your own party has. So let me set the stage and make things, at least in my view, a little bit rosier. So I believe that healthcare is being transformed by women. And why do I say that? So let me give you some facts that might be compelling to you. In the US, 80% of healthcare decisions are made by women. How do you get to that number? 51% of the population is female, so they make their own decisions. They also make decisions on behalf of their children and of their aging adults, usually their family members. So women are very powerful in healthcare decision making in the US. At the same time, as insurance is paying less and less and pushing more and more direct payment to the patient. So this is important. Women are also earning much higher incomes today, and the education level of women is very high. About 50% of doctors in the US are now, graduating classes are women. So there is a whole different perspective coming from the medical care delivery profession, whereas in the past it was really only the nurses who had took a different perspective. Now women are actually taking that perspective. The other very important changes are that with the internet, and women are among the highest users of the internet to communicate about health problems and research health problems. And the many topics that were previously taboo, such as the fact that 30 million women in the US have urinary incontinence, a very large number have fecal incontinence, wasn't discussed. Depression wasn't discussed. It's twice as prevalent in women than in men. People didn't talk about menopause, didn't talk about periods and menstrual pain. All these topics now are readily discussed. And so this is having an effect that on entrepreneurs as well, both male and female, but particularly on female entrepreneurs, where there is a whole burgeoning of entrepreneurs who are trying to address these problems that have been around for a very long time, but were basically ignored in the past. The other very important thing is personalized medicine. So everybody talks about personalized medicine, and it personally astounds me that one of the first steps of personalized medicine might be XX and XY. After all, we're looking at these tiny mutations in cancers and ignoring a huge genetic burden that does make us different. And we know today that there are very many diseases, common chronic diseases, in which men and women present their symptoms differently, respond to treatments differently. In fact, the diseases might be subtly or not so subtly different, and also have different outcomes. The best known is cardiac disease, but there is a whole raft of others. And the FDA has a women's health division, and there are many efforts from a policy and a government level to increase the understanding of these differences. Yet, my alma mater, Harvard Medical School, does not teach the differences in men and women with respect to healthcare and manifestations of disease. So even though there are data, they have not permeated the world at large, which is I think a very big problem and something that a lot of people are working on changing. The other issue that is of the unconscious bias, as more men and women and diverse people come into the healthcare marketplace, we hope that we can mitigate some of this bias by having opposing or different views that will open people's eyes more to this situation. So my view, which, by the way, is not held by the panelists, so it makes for a very good discussion, is a rather rosy one, and I'm an optimist by nature. So I believe that there is a movement, if you will, but it's not an organized movement, a grassroots change happening, at least in Silicon Valley. And I know that we have a distorted reality field there, so it may be either I'm hallucinating or it's a vision. But it is that there are now angel groups, crowdfunding, high net worth individuals, other kinds of funders who are seeing these small companies that are finding intriguing ways, minimally invasive ways of addressing many of these female problems, which, by the way, are known by some men in venture as, oh, I don't touch bikini medicine. And now this bikini medicine is turning out to be a very attractive market. And so there are ways by which the barriers to funding can be addressed by all these alternative mechanisms. And I think that there is a chance that from bottom up, there might be a democratization of medicine reflecting that 51% of the population has different biology, and entrepreneurs who see an opportunity in that, and money, and the ecosystem will I think, develop in a way that also benefits female entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in general. So this is my rosy view, which now I will address to the panel and get some feedback, and please disagree, this is the whole point of it. So Heather, let me put you on the spot first. You have been raising money for your company. Perhaps you could tell the audience about your company and talk a little bit about your experience.
Sure. Oh, this is on. Great. Well, it's great to be here, and my company last year participated in the Bayer Accelerator grants for apps. So I feel like I'm coming home a little bit when I get to return to Berlin for this conference. So this is great. So my background is biomedical engineering, and what I noticed was that females are underrepresented in so many areas across medicine and healthcare, and I was particularly struck by the lack of diversity on teams developing products, on the investor side deciding which products get funded, and just watching the trickle-down effect in the Bay Area of what gets built. So what my company does, Serona, is we measure sex hormones at the key times of day and at the right times of the month that allow us to put together a data set to paint a more holistic picture of what's going on in women's bodies. And so this is relevant in clinical trial research settings, and more, that's our long-term goal, and more immediately we can help the average patient paint a profile for a month-over-month bird's-eye view of her hormonal health. So I'm particularly interested in the chronic diseases that you mentioned that so often go underlooked, or overlooked rather, for many reasons, including the fact that we just don't collect this data. So of course, as an aftermath effect, we can't treat many areas of women's health properly. And to your point about what it's been like to fundraise for this, my experience has been very mixed. I think that people like to fund what they know and what they understand, and it's the investor's job to minimize risk. And when a topic isn't widely discussed, let alone understood, with outstanding bodies of research, it's really hard to overcome the educational bias to really convey the depth and seriousness of the problems that we're taking on. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity and work to do before women's health isn't viewed as a niche area. As you said, it's 51% of the population at stake, but for whatever reason, categorically, it's still viewed as other. And I think the intent is usually, I think most people have good intentions. It's just that's the system that we've built, and so now we have to work backwards, and that will take time. But I do feel, just to wrap up, I feel really optimistic about the future for the category as a whole and for our company, and I think it's a matter of making that extra effort to really nail your business model as an entrepreneur, to be able to communicate not only the big vision for what you're looking to address and build, but how are you going to make money today? And I think the companies that can pull ahead from the pack are the ones who have a sustainable model, and ideally a product that's built with lower regulatory hurdles, so that it can become that more tangible to investors, even the ones who are risk averse.
So Heather makes a good point. Women's health, as countless people have told, both of us at least, that women's health is a niche, and even if they were referring just to OBGYN, it's hard to believe it's a niche, because actually labor and delivery costs are a huge part of healthcare costs, so it can't be a niche. And to boot, the view of women's health isn't only about OBGYN. If you look at common chronic diseases, men and women are very different. So women's health is a 51% problem. However, still the perception is that it's a niche, both by pharma companies, other than with drugs, and also in terms of the VC investors, my colleagues. So it's definitely a pain point. So, Özge, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experiences?
Okay. Hi. So, okay, this is better. I make breasts, so I think I am very much relevant to what is being going on today. So my company, I'm a materials engineer, and I make breasts for surgeons to practice on, because 1 in 8 women experiences breast cancer, and oncoplastic techniques are getting wider and wider in order to not only save women from the cancer, but also still give her a body that she would like to continue her life in it. So what we are offering is a steerable, cuttable platform that it feels like you are as if cutting a breast. And I don't know, I'm lucky or something, but then my company is funded by an angel investment platform for women. So the founder is a woman. She only takes VCs who are women, or the man who has daughters. So in a sense, it is both woman for woman and also a man for woman. And all of those women or men in that organization, we are really helping each other in such a way that, the constant question is, how can I help you? How can I, and then I usually send all these wish lists, and then I send them to people, and somehow I'm always being helped. And one thing maybe what I have different in terms of this panel is I am a faculty member, and I would like to be a faculty member for, as long as I want it. So in a sense that I could somehow outsource those resource expenses in terms of the research projects, so that somehow overlap the science on top of the entrepreneurship and still continue doing it under the umbrella of a university. So, and I'm really happy to hear that all these struggles, so that at some point knowing that I will go through it. So,
Bola, your bio says that, among other things, you're very importantly interested in social transformation. So that makes you an ideal panelist here. Could you talk a little bit about your views?
Yes, actually, of course, economy is changing, and especially in Berlin, we have to reconstruct our economy. So all of us politicians are looking how can we just power our economy here in Berlin, and nowadays we realize that we have plenty of VC inflow to Berlin compared to European level, not to the US level, but European level. But all this money comes to IT startups. And so my question here, what I'm interested to learn, not give you the answer, but learn from you, is how do we get the money that comes to Berlin now, get it to substantial entrepreneurship and startups with substance that will create jobs here and will give us kind of production in Berlin, and how we can do this change. And of course, since entrepreneurship has been subject to, let's say, a good old boys network, there should be a change, and so I'm hoping for women to make this change here. And so
when you say substantial, you mean scalable, become bigger businesses?
No, I think upscalable enterprise is more a threat to business really than if you are growing on a slow level, because especially when we see people come and they know only like one of 100 of startups that we give our money to will give us a return on this invest. So you just need to earn from this single one. You need to earn very much. And so the IT people, they will come up and say, we have a very big scale we will move to. So you would rather like to give them the money than give it to things that need a big amount of starting money, which is in biotech. It's much more than you will have on an IT startup. And of course, the return on invest is smaller than you will have in IT.
Well, I disagree. It might take longer to get there.
No, please. Go ahead, Natalie, please.
Well, no, we live our lives and miss so many different things, but I think there is a perception, and it's an interesting dialogue we're having, particularly around how to set up a sidecar fund related to what we're doing. But there's absolutely a feeling that at the end of the day, in the IT world, you're going to make more money and you're going to make it faster. In other words, it doesn't take as much capital, it's shorter timelines, less infrastructure, some of which is true, but if you truly do look at the value creation in life sciences, it surpasses IT. And so you just have to be prepared for the longer timelines, although having said that, a lot of the IT companies are still 5 to 8 years before they really bring a sizable return. So that's just specific on that one. I just, obviously...
In IT, you're not in time to... In IT, you don't measure time to market, but time to exit.
Yes.
And that might be very fast.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
Does anyone else want to
I'd like to quickly comment.
Yeah,
so a middle ground between the two that we're seeing getting some traction in the Bay Area, it's being referred to as digital therapeutics as a new category, which shows the tech-like returns, but in healthcare. And I think that because it's provable and scalable in a way that biotech just inherently has a longer ramp-up time, those are the companies that are getting funded in the Bay Area.
Give some examples.
I mean, if you look at, say, Omada Health, they're doing really well right now because they've gone deep in understanding how to leverage reimbursement with the changes in the U.S. healthcare policy landscape, and they're offering a product that reaches huge population sizes, and they have the proof points of efficacy with a very clear path to reimbursement.
Just to interrupt, it's a diabetes management company.
So that's one example, and I think while we might see the terms change over the next 5 to 10 years, digital therapeutics is getting funded right now, but I think routing things back towards the female category, I haven't seen a company in that space or tangential ones see that same kind of success in a female-focused sector.
Other than there are some mental health companies, treatment for depression, for example, that are getting traction, and depression is overwhelmingly more common in women than in men. Natalie, could you comment on my rosy picture of a potential grassroots and a bypassing of the traditional barriers like the VCs, like academia, like corporate, from a more of a pull coming from women consumers, mothers, caregivers, and also from angels and other sources of funding that may not have the same mentality. For example, Özge has a angel investor with a different set of values. Could you comment on something? Is there anything like that in Canada?
I can't say that there's a grassroots specifically around women's health and specifically around funding, so I'll have to broaden my thoughts of where I've encountered this. I think there's some very interesting angel groups emerging where they are supporting particularly female founders, and part of what their messaging is that they just see better returns through these kinds of relationships, so I do think there is a movement afoot, certainly at the angel level, and we'll see how that matures into more of the VC world. But I think, to your point, as far as the entrepreneurial perspective, I think there is a great deal of passion by individuals to support specific health interests, and it turns out that there are a number of women who want to see better health care for women, and so it goes to my earlier point that with passion you can do anything, and if you really believe in what you're doing, I truly believe that you can push things forward across the finish line in the way that's necessary. So I think bringing those two together, where you actually might have a funder who's supportive to what you're trying to achieve, and you have the ability to get it done, I see those kinds of companies actually as being very successful in raising money.
Just to tag on to that.
Well, I think we're, it's a perfect example of bringing a really interesting funding model together with a passionate entrepreneur.
So just to mention some of those groups, there in the US, there's ASTIA, Women Entrepreneurs, and then there's also Golden Seeds, which also funds women entrepreneurs, and then there's also Springboard, that's women entrepreneurs, and then Broadway Angels are successful women who are looking at primarily women entrepreneurs. And when you talk to those investors, their view is that women who've made it to the point of pitching them have gone through so much adversity that they are the best, that they have, by virtue of the selection process, they're brilliant and the best of the lot, and that they can just sit there and pick off these fabulous entrepreneurs that nobody else is lining up to invest in, and they're very fortunate, in a very fortunate position, and have had lots of success. That's just sort of a by the way, but I think we're going to see more of that approach, and so there are two ways that we can change this ecosystem, or more than two. But one might be working from the top down, working on the traditional venture capitalists, working on academia to change their policies on, with professors who want to, women professors. There's data that women professors have a harder time creating companies. We can work on all the institutions, and we have been working on them, but that has been slow. Another approach is from the bottom-up approach, which is coming up with alternatives that go around these institutional barriers, which I think is also very interesting, and with two together, we might actually get real change. So, in this, what do you think that millennials will do when they become entrepreneurs? What do you think that the 25-year-old, are you seeing young entrepreneurs of that age? Natalie, for example, in your incubator, and are you, Özge, seeing them in Turkey? Can you talk a little bit about, are they thinking differently than you are? Are they encountering the same problems? How do they deal with them? I'd like to hear from both of you.
Would you like to?
You go.
Okay.
See, truly can.
Yes, I'm wearing green though too. So well, I think by teaching them, I'm teaching millennials, or I will teach in a couple of years. I think we will have more entrepreneurial spirit among them. Although we have the belief of they are disrespectful, and then they are not faithful in these things. All these surveys claim that they are, but once they are, we don't think they are. But then once you ask them, they say that they are the most reliable, and they do believe what they want to do. So they believe in values rather than companies in that sense. And what I would like among them, at least of looking for our mission, I want more women engineers, and I want more women in basic sciences. And I don't think you can teach someone, I think we should start teaching at a much earlier age. That is what we were discussing yesterday. It is for this grassroots approach, or from top-down approach. We just need that critical masses of engineers and basic scientists who are women. We are not asking for a positive quota at all. We are just talking about equal opportunities at equal ages, and rather than loving the small female kids as or little princess, maybe we could just tell them or little engineer to be, or that kind of even like subtle mind games. So I think the woman and the data also shows that women, given the opportunity, performs much better in engineering and basic sciences according to men. Like Turkish also examination data provides us, and even internationally we have proved to women scoring better in math classes better than men. So we just need that opportunity to set up there, and with millennials, or who are just a little older than millennials, I think we just need equal opportunity. That's all.
I'll use an experience recently where I was on a panel, and actually a number of the panel members were more of my age group than the millennials, but the audience was primarily a much younger group of women, and it was specifically to talk to women about opportunities. And I can only say that the panel members were far more optimistic than the audience, which really surprised me. That they actually saw the barriers as truly barriers, and were really, you could tell because it was a very dynamic conversation we ended up having with this group, and you could tell by their questions and their stories, they had either encountered some very significant challenges, I guess, or anticipating such challenges. And the particular subject we ended up speaking a lot about was, what do I do, career or kids? And it's interesting that they actually still very much saw it as career or kids. And it was a wide diversity. Most of them were science students, mixed in with MBAs and that kind of thing. And it was, I think for me, quite surprising how strong their feelings were about this. And they were very much looking for advice as to how to, A, make a decision, which of course is impossible for us to do that for them, but also, should they consider a different path, like a different career? So, we need to do a better job communicating the opportunities, I think. Otherwise, we're going to continue to lose people at an early age because they see it as too challenging.
So I misunderstood. I thought you said they were optimistic.
No. I'm saying the oldies were. The youngins were like...
Oh, no.
No,
That's
very,
terrible.
very surprising.
Oh dear.
I just have to say I am a millennial, I'm pretty sure, by definition. And I think the drop-off, I mean, when I was an engineering student, females constituted 20% of my graduating class. And I think it's about the same statistic today. There's a bigger drop-off, though, that I see from middle management to senior executive levels, and that's true in the startup world at big companies. And that's what I think is unfortunate, because until there are women at the top and there are young girls who can say, oh, I want to be like her, and we have those role models in greater numbers, I think that's when we can start to see real change.
Bola, do you speak with millennials here in Germany?
Actually not, but might be an old school view that I have, but as I was asking for substance in startups earlier, I really don't believe in doing your first startup as you're a student, because I have the impression that it might be useful to have contact, to already have experienced what you're dealing with. So we had from the Federal Ministry of Science in Germany, we had a program where they said we want graduate university members just look up what you made in the process of your analysis, and because you didn't get the devices you need, you can't buy them by the market, so you develop them on yourself, and let's make a business out of these things. So maybe you can check out if there's a second use you can apply this to, and we will fund that, and we will give you benefits to improve these things. And in my view, this is a more soundable way of rather creating spin-offs than creating startups, because at least in Germany we have this thing, we are looking for people being 22 years old and then just do their first startup, and then the next thing is the next thing we say in politics is we have to give them the chance. We have to develop a culture of second chance, because of course they will fail, or most of them will fail in the first attempt they made. So I don't believe it should be very early when you start up, but just get some little life experience and then make your startup, and could work better. I don't know if it really works better, but
in the US you get million chances to fail. Not million, but you get many chances to fail. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's a fact. And then there is Peter Thiel, with whom I don't agree. Peter Thiel, who has a finished undergraduate school and has an MBA from Stanford, he pays certain smart young people to leave college and become entrepreneurs because he thinks that a lot of the learning we do is actually inhibits our creativity and innovation. I think that's less the case in life sciences because there is a certain amount of accretive learning that you have to have, but may be different. But there are different, very diverse views on this. Could you talk a little bit about the Green Party and your interesting policies?
Yesterday we were talking about the policies we have to encourage, and the right word I was missing yesterday was empower women in the Green Party, which is in German in the audience Emanzipation might be. We would every list we have to set up for any election, whether on federal or land level or local level, we would put every second, but beginning with the first position would be given to a woman, and the others are open to everybody. So whether men or women can apply for these positions, which means in the end we will outcome with an over quota.
More women than men.
More women than men. Always, at least as much women as men. Of course, you have some instruments to override this, as not enough women would show up, so we have to fix the list. But usually, this is the first attempt we make. We always have to make it. We're putting up a list.
Do you have a comment on that?
I like the policy somehow, but how to empower women, I think the key word is flexible work hours is the way to empower women. And like in general, like we just don't want these extra opportunities or these things, like although sometimes they're appreciated. What we really need is some kind of a business model that is going to fit to our lives, because being an entrepreneur or being a faculty member, in the end, what you do, as long as you optimize things for your company, but you also optimize things for yourself and your life. And in a sense that I think this dropping woman or having, because you were also talking, you were having hard time finding the woman to get nominated for those positions, right? So they were kind of getting out before you can even consider them as politicians and, you know, really contributing to society at that level. And maybe for women to go up and up, what we need is much more flexible work hours, like all these lifestyle changes that governments and states can push for, so that we will appear more and more in upper positions.
Heather.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, but I think the first step is to get them in the door. And I really liked your slide, looking at the tech giants, Facebook, Google, and Apple. I think a good example is Apple took, I think it was 3 iterations on their health kit product before they included the original form of quantified self, which is cycle tracking. Women have been doing that for thousands of years, but until you have teams that are diverse enough, you don't build products that include the needs of both genders. And that's just the way it is. And so I think ideally we can set up these perfect infrastructures that are flexible and whatnot, but I think until the 75 and 80% on your slide become more close to equal, we just have a long way to go.
So I think that's a very important point Heather made about not including menstrual tracking, which, you know, is very important to many women. When you have all male engineers, it's something that completely escaped their purview. And this is what I mean by not thinking of questions that are actually big needs for women that just don't even come up. Natalie, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to add to I mean, if we truly believe what the studies are telling us, that our bottom line is improved by having a balance of men and women around the table, that has got to be a motivator. I mean, we all want better returns, right? Those of us in industry, you know, we're fundamentally incentivized, or whichever way you want to look at it. We stay in business because we are able to produce an ongoing bottom line, positive bottom line. So if the data is telling us that by having more women in senior management, more women in the boardroom, this is going to improve our bottom line, I can't believe that can't be a huge motivator.
Yeah, I mean, I postulate that some of that is because it's not comfortable or easy. So there's this fit, right? And people are always hiring for fit. I think one of the problems with fit is that you look for people who are like you.
Well, they do, and I think particularly in the biotech, because the venture capital community has so much influence over it, they will say very directly, you know, I want to go with the guy I trust, and it's there. They just don't recruit beyond that very small known environment over and over and over again. So I think what we have to be able to do is, you know, infiltrate that, like just broaden it out as we go, instead of, it's not like a quick, you know, binary shift, but it's certainly, it's this bias that we have to break.
And something I hear very frequently, I'm not suggesting that that's what you're doing, but in general we hear that there isn't a pipeline. There aren't women.
There isn't a pool.
There isn't a pool of women. But when you really look at that, through the eyes of unconscious bias, what you find is that the criteria, or at least the unconscious intake, is interfering with candidates who are actually quite meritorious. Let me take a non-life science example, which you may or may not know about. Orchestras in the US were having trouble recruiting women. And so they came up with a way of carpeting the floor so you couldn't hear the heels, you couldn't hear, but they had a curtain and they could only hear, they couldn't see the person. And all of a sudden, there was a huge upswing in recruitment of women, even though the same people said there weren't enough women before. So something even in assessing the skill goes through some complex, deep psychological process where somehow it gets complicated. I think that happens a lot. There are many examples where they take the same resume, change the name, and they give it evaluation, it comes out differently. Now, I don't know if this is changing the number of women, but Google is using quantitative tests now, anonymized, in hiring people to get around some of this. So I think the bottom line, it's very complicated, and I'd like to turn it over to the audience, and I hope you have lots of questions for the panel. Please.
Okay, well, let's see if we can grab some mics real fast.
So like I said before, I'm coming from the developer world, and being a web developer for a long time, being in this kind of space, what we see there is that basically we don't have a lot of women who are coding, and that's not because anybody keeps them out. In fact, all these nerds, they would love to have more women on their meetups, or more women in particular online. You have this platform called github.com where you basically can share all your code and you work together with people and you collaborate and so on. And it's like 90% men, and that's by pure choice. But for example, in other like government agencies and so on, you see almost only women. So there's also like this natural like selection where they see themselves fit. Sometimes more in this and this. So I don't think it is actually possible to take all these tech companies, which are made of by mainly developers, and on the end equalize them to 50-50. That might just not work because it's not the way. I mean, I don't know why they're not coming, you know.
But you use the word fit.
But
I don't know, but it's actually like it's a very natural, especially in this kind of world, because it is really open. It's not that you have to study computer science in order to be a developer. Actually, most of the web developers today, they're just people who did this in their living room, in their child's room, and started coding and started building things. It's a very things did this just by choice. There was no border, no selection process, no filter whatsoever. It just happened like this, and that's the result.
I'll let Heather speak.
Well, lots to say there. I can say what I do personally. I definitely can't speak for other entrepreneurs, but I think there are tactical ways to address the problem that you mentioned, which is very, very real. I mean, it's essentially the pipeline problem, right? But like your example about changing the name on resumes, I do something similar when I hire developers. I'm not changing the name, but I give people a standardized test called Codility. And you take this test and you get a score, and it gives me a really strong sense right out of the gate about the chops of this dev who's applying for a job with my company. I look at their GitHub. It's the good thing about hiring developers is it's very quantitative. And I think it's also where you're sourcing talent. It's sure, I mean, there are conferences all over the Bay Area all the time about how to find and recruit top female talent, but if you're going through your own network, inherently it's going to be people who are similar to you in some way. And so I think it's just getting creative to think about groups online that you might not normally post within, and just push those boundaries so that you can own your own pipeline, because as an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. So I think taking accountability for who your applicants are is really the first tactical thing you can do.
True, but even though to some sense you just have a different pot to choose from, right? So if you have like 80% of developers being male, then that's just what you have available. And you most likely will pick more male because they're just more available around you or accessible at the time. So it's
But 50 years ago, doctors were all male, and people thought women couldn't be doctors. I was told that I could not be as good doctor as a man, and I went to medical school in 1980. I'm less convinced by that, because we were told we couldn't vote. I mean, there are so many examples. We were never good enough, and somehow that's changing. So
I want to make a comment on that, because I'm the father of 3 daughters, and I will confess a certain bias. As a matter of fact, I will confess a deliberate bias. So I was in charge of hiring for my first firm. There were about 480 lawyers. I deliberately selected, because I was a father of 3 daughters, but more importantly, I was a coach in women's sports for 15 years. At the same time, I was growing up in the legal profession. And I deliberately selected women because the data showed me over time, women who played team sports, team sports required collaboration and effort. Women who were newspaper editors or editors of a college journal or a college newspaper. I deliberately went after them. Why? The one thing I noticed, coaching women's sports for 15 years and also coaching men's sports from time to time, women understand the idea of teamwork and collaboration better than men do. Just a life observation of 20 years. You could give them a role, they understand the role, they endorse the role, they buy into the role, and there's more of a spirit of, this is my role, this is my job as part of this effort. And I will tell you, I look back every year. I still am in charge when I was at Cooley of recruiting because I ran the office. I deliberately went after that. I also, to be honest with you, went after males who came out of the same environment. But I had a bias to pick women. And to be honest with you, my bias was confirmed. They were very good team players. And if you've got a business that relies on team play, I will tell you, they're just maybe, okay, so I'm gonna make a biased comment. They're just DNA selection process, they're better at that. Simple as that. Question?
thank you, John.
But that's a bias because I have 3 daughters.
Well, thank you for the very interesting discussion, and I have a slightly polemic comment, maybe, or maybe an open question in a way. What I'm seeing here, the 2 entrepreneurs we have are basically working in the field of women's health. And
3 entrepreneurs, and Natalie is not working in women's health.
No, I don't mean Natalie, I mean Özge and Heather. They're both doing, you're having the breast for the surgeons to work with, and you're doing the female cycle. So in a way, the impression I'm getting is, in order for women to really get there and to get the position to become successful, they need to open up a new field. And now my question would be a little bit, that maybe goes in the direction of Natalie. So what do we have to do to have women being successful everywhere, and not just opening a new field, which is important and it's innovative and it's great that we're doing it, because no guy would have probably touched it. But what do we need to do now to take the next step and actually have them become successful anywhere, and not just in a field that maybe appeals a little bit more in the beginning?
Well, I think it relates to the question of why is 80% of the men showing up for these particular positions. I do think, as women, we're not showing up. Like, we're already cutting it off before we even try. So I do think this, I'm a huge fan of supporting courage. When I hire people, one of the big things I look for is courage. I think it's a dying word, and I think that these are the kind of people that are just going to move forward in a way that we need to, and bring people along. I do think that the challenge about the 80% showing up as a developer, they're not seeing that as an opportunity. They see it as, and maybe also it's not a culture they really want to get into, because if you're like surrounded by 25-year-old men, good God, right? It's not appealing. So you have to somehow have a little bit more happening there that would actually, incentivize a woman to try and do something. Because I tell you, like, for years, when Anula and I first met, we didn't realize this, but when we first met, I was CEO of a biotech company. I think I was it was a long time ago, way too long. But I was one of 2 CEOs in Canada in biotech. I mean, really? And I'll tell you the other part of it. So a bunch of the venture capital things, they would always have these fishing trips, right? I found this out later. They were all going on fishing trips. I didn't even know what was going on, but that was the main bonding experience. And I said to the head VC guy, I said, hey, how come you never invited me on these damn fishing trips? And first he's looking at me like, are you kidding? You would go? I said, yeah, but the principle is you excluded me without even asking me. And he said, well, the sleeping arrangement. I said, come on, I got brothers. I mean, really. It's not like so bad, but you're just immediately put into a situation that probably is not very comfortable. So that's part of our challenge, right?
There are 2. There's a question there, and then Bola has a comment.
Well, let's have a bias. I'll start with the question here.
Yes, bias. That's fine for me.
Fine, me
I must admit, I studied chemistry, and at that time we still had a German company called Höchst. They told all the women, just leave, go home cooking. This time has changed. But I would also admit, I personally feel, out of my experience being working always in a men environment, not all the jobs I want to do. I'm not sure whether really I would like to do programming. Or I even do not know whether I want to be in the actual business environment at the real top, because that is not what is giving me a kind of satisfaction achieving something. And so I think we should be open as well, that we do not force anybody to go this route as long as we do not change the business environment in total for both men and women. And I feel that has to happen, because otherwise why should I fight for the baseline with products I do not believe in? So I think it's more than just open the doors for women. And I feel this kind of discussion always to say we have the political environment. No, I think we have to be open to ourselves to say, yes, we want to go this way. And I have a daughter, she's studying natural science as well, so I think I'm talking with a background out of this environment. But I really want to make this point to the men there. He says there are not enough women. Perhaps they don't like to do these jobs.
The genre.
just wanted to add a connecting point. I think for example, if we talk about entrepreneurship and development, I have a similar experience. So we got 200 applicants, we got 3 female applicants, and I don't think it's because it is the case that it's just simply less applicants. So we would be extremely, it's not that we wouldn't want to hire women, we actually, the contrary, we would love to hire women. We 6 guys in the garage, we would really like to have a bit of diversity. So we thought about this for a long time, why don't we get applicants? We reviewed if maybe it's communicated the wrong way, anything. And the only thing we came up with, and I think this is a point that's missing, is simply no tech women role models. That's the only thing. It's it's connected to the points. Why do people start coding 5 years old? They just see something on TV, a cool, geeky guy coding something, they do the same thing. So the few developers, female developers that I met were very good. They're really hard level. So I think one thing that you could do immediately, I don't think it's at least at startups, it's not a work environment thing. The our tech work environment is terrible. It's I'm simplifying, but it's like guys with headphones on doing their stuff. But it would transform automatically. If you had 50-50 women, it would be a different workplace. So I think one thing you could do straight away.
They'll all be wearing headphones?
Yeah. I think it would change for the positive. So I think one thing you could do right now is take the ones that are good, take the women, put them on stage. Don't put them on the women panel, put them on the real panel. I think this is
Bola has been waiting patiently.
What I was thinking about on your question is that it might be a narrow view on this point, but on an economic view, it's if women just exploit female problems and will create a business out of this, it's okay, because what we are looking for is not, wider the business we are in, but just wider business at all. So if there is a field you can make money and you can develop things there, which is not addressed by men by now, it's no problem, because then we just open this field and it's okay. And it's the question is, how do you start turning on the computer and just sit there for long hours? It's just usually it's just hit and run games you're playing there. They seem not to be very attractive to girls. Maybe
There's a bias.
it might be. So if we have more intelligent computer games, maybe more girls will also move to this device.
Okay, we have time for one more question, unfortunately, Pablo, because we've got a demonstration that's coming up next, and it's actually neither male nor female, so it's not biased in any direction. All right, we'll get to it.
So I want to thank you for the discussion. I think it's when someone has a problem, or not a problem, just an issue, it's not a problem. I think to open this to discussion, it's a good start. So we at the CRG Center for Regulation are leading one of these large consortiums, European consortium, which is basically to support and to encourage more women in science. Okay? This is together with other research institutions. So it seems that we all recognize that there is a huge issue here that needs to be solved. So I wonder, when we discuss about entrepreneurship and women's in business and so on, and it's a question for Bola. I wonder how much politicians do in terms of education, because this is not something that you're going to start someone at 20 years or 30 years and you're going to transform in an entrepreneur, or we're going to change things just by flipping a coin. This is something that you had to bring from the start, and I wonder sometimes what would this kind of conversation if you approach this same issue on a kindergarten. Let's say if you expose this to 5-year-old kids, right, and discuss it, they would see, what's the problem here? I don't think they perceive themselves differently from each other, right? So something has to be done at the education level, and I wonder what politicians will do to regards to that.
Actually, there might be one answer I shouldn't give, and since nobody hears now, I can tell you, but it's like, be careful. It's like, we will have a pitch at least every 5 years when you will start completely new as a politician. This means every initiative you start now should return on invest in maybe 2 years, because then your voters will reward you. So going to the kindergarten and encouraging girls to do anything, it's too long time to market, because the results will turn up 20 years to come. So this might be a point for people working for the administration, but as a politician, it's too long to go, because in 20 years from now, I don't know what I'm doing then.
But thank you for being honest and realistic. We really appreciate that, especially from a politician.
I apologize, we have to cut
Yes, we are supposed to.
We have to cut this.
We have to.
Our next thing is a demonstration.
Thank you.
of robot.
Thank you very much.
So,